we are on the threshold of what is known as the sixth global extinction, wave of extinction. Certainly there's no guarantee that we can survive. So the Akashic field is a field of interconnection, a field of oneness, and a field of joint one system evolution, a field of mind, because we don't live out to what we truly are, this oneness, this coherence-oriented system. It has got to the point where it needed to change. We're beginning to perceive that change now consciously. It's there anyway. Other species undergo these changes and they either mutate or they become extinct.
It might feel unsettling to imagine that firmly established historical events could be reinterpreted or even altered through supposedly hidden knowledge. Yet this very notion sets the stage for understanding why the so-called Akashic Records have become so relevant in current debates. People ask whether there might be a cosmic library, one that contains not only everything that has already taken place, but also anything that could still happen. Is this merely fantasy or a glimpse of a deeper truth? Throughout history, various esoteric currents and mystery schools have mentioned this idea of an energetic repository, describing it as a space where every human thought and emotion leaves its mark. The word Akasha from Sanskrit means ether or subtle space. This intriguing interpretation raises many questions. What is to be gained by accessing these records? Is there really a chance to rewrite the past and free ourselves from traumas and repeated cycles? Or is it all just a mistake that masks attempt to manipulate historical truth? Beyond the boundaries of spirituality, some modern scholars, such as Ervin László, have suggested an Akashic field that might bridge mysticism and science. According to him, there is a deeper level of information permeating all reality, something akin to a universal database connecting past, present, and future. David Bohm, meanwhile, introduced the concept of an implicate order, indicating that what we see is only the tip of a huge iceberg. Rupert Sheldrake joined the discussion with his hypothesis of morphogenetic fields, betting on a kind of collective memory that influences the behavior of living organisms. It comes as no surprise that critics have spoken out, accusing these models of pushing scientific boundaries into what many consider pure metaphysical speculation. Even so, each new generation renews its interest in this topic, especially when questions arise about reality being manipulated by certain select groups. Conspiracy theories point to secret societies like Freemasonry or Hermetic orders, which allegedly preserve rituals capable of accessing or even editing these records. This unorthodox view sometimes clashes with mainstream Christianity, which tends to reject the idea of revising timelines or rewriting events that are grounded in faith in an unchanging divine plan. Nevertheless, a fair number of people are attracted by the notion that humans might play a bigger role in shaping their own destiny, challenging religious and political dogmas. So how do these ideas fit into our current worldview? Is it possible that human experience is under continual construction in such a way that tapping into this cosmic field means rediscovering our own story? Maybe the biggest challenge is distinguishing spiritual freedom from simple delusion. Even so, in the face of so many unknowns, those who find this topic intriguing seek out answers that can make a real difference in both individual lives and our collective path. After all, if there really is a way to break negative patterns or shape the future, why not explore the possibilities? These are the initial questions guiding the present study. They invite each person to reflect on the limits of knowledge, the roots of their fears, and the breadth of their hopes. What do you think? Could there truly be a universal library storing every thought and action? And if so, who might hold the keys to that mysterious doorway? The journey to unravel these enigmas begins here, in a realm where science, faith, and philosophy are intertwined, leaving it up to each individual to decide how far they are willing to go in this deep dive. With that in mind, the door is open to controversial yet equally inspiring theories that merge spirituality with rational observation. The invitation remains: question, investigate, and discover. The idea of a subtle space where all the universe's events remain recorded appears in ancient texts, especially those linked to Vedic traditions. In various translations, the term Akasha is mentioned as a quintessential element, something beyond the physical world. Many esoteric scholars believe this term conveys the concept of an omnipresent ether, in which all human actions are imprinted. Certain manuscripts declare, each thought, emotion, and action leaves its mark on a subtle field, suggesting a reality broader than that normally accepted by common sense. To grasp the foundations of this belief, it helps to recall that Eastern philosophies have long spoken of a continuous flow of energy permeating all things. In Hindu scriptures, this viewpoint not only underpins spiritual practices, but also justifies faith in rebirth cycles and karma. Later on, Western theosophical movements adopted this concept and sought to disseminate it under the label Akashic Records. Helena Blavatsky, one of the founders of the Theosophical Society, went so far as to claim that these records were the source of secret knowledge accessible only to those who had properly trained their psychic sensitivity. On the other hand, Western society, and in particular, the dominant Christian mindset, have frequently viewed the notion of a universal record outside biblical doctrine with suspicion. In the Christian tradition, it is generally held that only divine omniscience encompasses all of history's flow, leaving no room for individuals to independently alter past events or catch a glimpse of the future. This contrast raises questions about free will, predestination, and the true reach of human perception. One might ask, to what extent does a theory that proposes rewriting the past conflict with the non-negotiable foundation of a faith based on divine providence? In an effort to reconcile these seemingly opposite poles, contemporary researchers have introduced scientific hypotheses that invoke a deeper informational field. Ervin László, in a number of his works, has promoted the idea of an Akashic field that explains phenomena of quantum interconnection, suggesting that particles, minds, and even galactic systems might share information on a deep level. David Bohm, a renowned physicist, put forth the notion of an implicate order, claiming that the visible world is only the surface expression of a more complex network of correlations. Rupert Sheldrake, with his theory of morphogenetic fields, goes a step further and proposes a form of collective memory that surpasses traditional genetics, implying that certain crucial information might be passed along without any direct mediation of the senses. These concepts remain controversial. Many mainstream scientists argue that the ideas of Bohm, László, and Sheldrake go beyond what can be measured in laboratories, edging closer to mystical speculations than testable hypotheses. Yet their supporters maintain that quantum physics already deals with events that defy classical logic, such as non-locality and entanglement, leaving the door open to accept an even broader informational reality. In this sense, modern quantum theories might offer a methodological bridge to ponder the presence of a universal data repository. Is this repository something tangible, or does it remain a metaphor for interpreting intangible phenomena of consciousness? In truth, some historical documents connect the concept of a record to secret practices in initiatory orders. Accounts suggest that references to Akasha were found in Hermetic circles and possibly in more discreet segments of Freemasonry. However, these mentions remain shrouded in mystery, fueling rumors that certain hidden circles are able to manipulate reality. The notion of a universal database sparks both fascination and dread, because if genuine access to such information exists, one could theoretically reconfigure past events or steer desirable future outcomes. For those who see this idea as a mere metaphor, it is worth remembering that certain philosophical traditions have already embraced the concept of time as a non-linear dimension, and nowadays, even by science. Thus, these Akashic Records could serve as a symbolic key, helping us realize that all existence might be interconnected. At the same time, the question arises, is this a valid path toward expanding consciousness, or just another enticing theory that undermines, without solid proof, mainstream knowledge? Considering the broad set of theories surrounding the Akashic Records, one could say that this energetic repository holds a strategic position in the midst of divergent worldviews. First, it stands out as a meeting point between ancient mysticism and bold scientific approaches. For some, these records represent a kind of universal memory, enabling not just access to what has been experienced, but also to possible futures. Literally speaking, they would be proof that time and space are nothing but flexible constructs open to conscious interaction. Metaphorically, they would function as a therapeutic tool, offering the chance to reinterpret traumas and release ingrained patterns. In esoteric studies, it is often said that every human experience, whether individual or collective, is embedded in this cosmic field. Like each thought emitted leaves a permanent trail in the fabric of existence. Numerous Hermetic texts describe reality as a set of vibrations, and the Akashic Records would be the backdrop where those vibrations meet and take shape. The question remains, if that information really is out there, is there a way to identify and decode it without losing objectivity? Many practitioners, especially in holistic therapeutic settings, claim that access to the records occurs through specific meditation or altered consciousness techniques, such as guided visualization or deep trance. Thus, the central element is not just conceptual, but experiential. The individual would get in touch with their own memories, contained in subtle dimensions, aiming to uncover the roots of emotional problems or the repetition of unwanted patterns. To reinforce the legitimacy of these practices, their defenders frequently cite testimonials from people who claim to have discovered profound insights by reading their past stories, allegedly experiencing meaningful life changes after coming into contact with memories unknown at the conscious level. Although this discourse of personal transformation might sound inspiring, it is important to consider other controversial aspects of rewriting the past. In more radical theories, people talk about effectively changing timelines as though it were possible to erase episodes from historical records or alter the course of events. Some argue that this rewriting amounts to changing vibrations, so certain facts would no longer echo in present reality. However, this idea directly conflicts with common sense, which generally sees the past as something fixed, unchangeable, and firmly established. In this clash, the central element, the records, takes on the role of a boundary line separating exoteric knowledge, open to everyone, and esoteric knowledge, restricted to a select few. Initiatory groups dating back to antiquity have consistently claimed to hold special interpretive keys that unlock levels of understanding inaccessible to the uninitiated. Freemasonry and the Rosicrucian Order, for example, are frequently mentioned in conspiracy theories for supposedly preserving methods of Akashic reading, although no factual evidence has ever confirmed such suspicions. Simply the fact that these organizations guard the details of their rituals so discreetly is enough to fuel popular imagination that something far beyond everyday explanation goes on behind those closed doors. Moreover, within religious debate, the role of these records faces much resistance. Suppose classical Christian teaching presents divine omniscience as the sole source of all universal information. In that case, the proposal of any archive existing outside of the deity might appear heretical or misguided. This clash of worldviews involves two distinct poles. On one side, belief in an unchanging divine order independent of human intervention. On the other, the proposition that humanity has some wiggle room to discover and shape future paths. In this way, the Akashic Records become a point of contention and reflection, leading many to question their faith perspectives and their assumptions about time itself. Nevertheless, the central position of the Akashic Records becomes clear when one observes the importance placed on them both on an individual and a collective level. On a personal scale, they could serve as a self-discovery tool, helping overcome emotional or karmic hurdles. In a broader sense, they touch on the core of what it means to be human in a universe where nothing is lost and everything remains stored on some subtle layer. So the questions persist. Are there well-defined limits to this cosmic library? More importantly, how prepared are human beings to handle what they might discover upon cracking open those invisible pages? Discussions of the Akashic Records tend to break down into a few points of particular importance, since the notion of a universal archive touches on different aspects of human experience. First, there is the hypothesis that access to this repository might be limited to small groups, suggesting a power disparity that would shape the very telling of history. Next, we find the controversial theme of rewriting the past, which raises questions about how malleable time really is and the meaning of free will. We also see ongoing claims of secret societies' involvement, along with scientific arguments attempting to give legitimacy to the concept. Finally, there is the question of how all this affects our perception of time, space, and individual or collective autonomy. Each of these areas offers new angles to explore. Regarding restricted knowledge and elites, many conspiracy theorists assert that certain initiatory groups have discovered ways to access the Akashic Records to gather vital secrets, whether from the past or the future. According to this perspective, crucial historical events might have been orchestrated based on privileged information, guaranteeing the maintenance of power by hidden societies. Freemasonry or the Rosicrucian order are frequently mentioned in this context, with references to internal manuscripts, never revealed to the general public, that supposedly mention specific rituals for reading the records. The pointed question is whether it is credible that a handful of individuals have gained entry to a cosmic library while the rest of humanity remains in the dark. Or is this idea just another of the many stories about manipulation circulating in the popular imagination, especially in times of uncertainty and distrust of institutions? Moving on, the idea of past and future manipulation emerges as one of the most challenging aspects of common sense. The possibility of rewriting historical events goes against most philosophical and religious schools that treat the past as unchangeable. Typically, even in Christian theology, God does not undo what has already occurred. He either redeems it or incorporates it into a larger plan. So, suggesting that an informational field might be consciously altered provokes immediate discomfort, particularly in worldviews that emphasize chronological linearity. Still, certain esoteric authors claim that rewriting pertains more to the individual's internal perception than to physically erasing events from history. They believe that by reinterpreting traumatic occurrences through an Akashic immersion, a person changes the emotional burden attached to those events, effectively seeing them in a new light. This process serves as profound healing, though it does not imply tampering with the world's external records. Even so, the discomfort lingers. If this personal redemption already suggests a major transformation of reality, how far could this modifying power extend if applied collectively? The conversation takes another turn when it comes to secret societies and the role of the occult. From time immemorial, popular culture has depicted closed groups possessing supernatural or transcendent knowledge. The occult is seen as the veil that conceals practices and rites unfathomable to most people. Hermetic texts attributed to various movements hint vaguely at the alleged ability to manipulate energies that stretch across the past, present, and future. Meanwhile, historians argue there is no official record proving that the Akashic Records have ever been used in practice, leaving most of the discussion in the realm of conjecture. By contrast, believers in these theories remind us that a lack of evidence could also be due to well-orchestrated secrecy. Which explanation is more convincing? Are there no proofs simply because such power does not exist, or do they never come to light in order to preserve an invisible global hierarchy? In scientific approaches and the consciousness factor, researchers point toward a synergy between quantum findings and the concept of a universal informational field. Ervin László writes about an Akashic field in which every cosmic particle, from the tiniest to the largest, remains non-locally interlinked and retains information. David Bohm, through his Implicate order, proposed that visible reality is merely the superficial manifestation of a deeper, more dynamic fabric where everything is connected. Rupert Sheldrake, with his morphogenetic fields, describes a type of collective memory that influences patterns of behavior in species. Critics argue that these models still lack airtight empirical support. Still, from a research standpoint, they serve as a guiding thread to ponder whether matter is really the sole foundation of existence. Put differently, if modern physics already acknowledges phenomena like quantum entanglement, in which two particles remain in sync even when separated by vast distances, why not consider the possibility of a greater web that stores and conveys information about any fact or process? Lastly, one must consider the impacts of time, space, and autonomy on our perceptions. Much of Western culture has been shaped by the idea of chronological linearity, with the past definitively closed, the present lived moment by moment, and the future developing incrementally. If the Akashic Records are taken seriously, then a new outlook arises in which past, present, and future exist in a kind of quantum now. Time would no longer be a one-way street, but more like a fabric in which every point intersects with another. Under such circumstances, human autonomy might expand or, paradoxically, become more threatened. It might expand because properly trained individuals could, in principle, access previously hidden information. Yet, it could be threatened if certain groups truly monopolize this knowledge, influencing timelines or steering major historical paths. It is in this clash of perspectives that the depth of this subject truly unfolds. What once appeared to be just a mystical hypothesis, that there could be a record of the universe, now resonates in philosophical, political, and scientific spheres of immense relevance. Some see it as a call to awaken our consciousness, because if there is a cosmic field, then we humans are not mere spectators. Instead, we could come to recognize our responsibility in this grand design, taking on the role of co-creators. Yet others hold that all this is mere conjecture, an elaborate tale that both mesmerizes and intimidates, but that ultimately fails to meet the rigorous demands of scientific inquiry. Even so, the intrigue remains because, at the core of this debate lies not only a quest for explanations, but also a longing for transcendence. In other words, it is a desire to surpass the boundaries set by conventional perspectives. In the end, each of these focal points shows how important it is to maintain a healthy dose of skepticism while staying open to new ideas. If the possibility of a universal record turns out to be more than a myth, the consequences for human history would be enormous. On the other hand, even if we are dealing solely with a metaphor, its symbolic value seems just as powerful, a reminder that every action and thought leaves traces, possibly permanent, woven into a fabric connecting all reality. Either way, the conversation prompts a fundamental question. How far does human understanding extend, and to what degree can, or should, we reshape our own destiny? Looking at the Akashic Records as a universal informational field has practical and philosophical consequences that touch both personal understanding and social structures. First, if these records actually exist, human beings would undergo a massive shift in how they see themselves. Accepting the idea that each thought and action is recorded on some subtle level tends to raise personal responsibility, as everything would carry repercussions resonating through the cosmic fabric. This viewpoint diverges from the secular and materialistic perspective, which typically restricts the impact of our choices on the immediate world around us. There is also a therapeutic or transformative side, the opportunity to revisit memories charged with pain or trauma, deepening our ability to come to terms with our past. Many holistic therapists and facilitators believe that by reading the Akashic Records, we can better understand deep-seated behavioral patterns, clearing emotional blocks rooted in the unconscious. From this angle, rewriting what has happened does not mean erasing facts, but changing how we interpret them so we can free ourselves from limiting beliefs. Because such a process could take place individually or collectively, some speculate that even historical conflicts might be transformed if there were a genuine effort to reassess long-standing patterns of violence and domination. The conversation also affects power dynamics. If hypothetically there are groups able to access and manipulate the records, this creates an opening for large-scale control. Just as people talk about a monopoly on natural resources, there could be a monopoly on quantum information, enabling accurate forecasting of future scenarios or even direct influence over society's course. Conspiracy theories have already suggested that political or economic elites take advantage of such knowledge, fostering mass dependency or ignorance. However, the lack of solid evidence makes conclusive statements impossible, fueling a social imagination full of questions and guesses. Another angle to consider is the religious realm. Some segments of traditional faith categorically reject the possibility of humans interfering with supposedly divine records. Others, more open-minded, see the notion of an Akashic field as confirmation that divinity works through cosmic laws, where human consciousness plays a creative role. This tension encourages thoughtful discussion. If the sacred is present in every particle of the universe, then the classic gap between human and divine could lose its force, giving way to a spirituality of co-creation. Two extreme positions emerge. On one side, those who embrace the Akashic Records want to expand consciousness and uphold free will as a way to shape reality. On the other side, critics condemn this idea as a source of illusions or a tool for manipulation by so-called initiates. In both cases, the potential impact of this theme is clear, challenging long-standing doctrines and offering new ways to question the linear nature of time and the seemingly fixed structure of existence. The inevitable question remains, are we ready to handle the practical ramifications of a knowledge that could, in theory, disrupt our deepest notions of faith, science, and power? There is no denying that the idea of a field where all experiences are stored, accessible, or even changeable provokes as much fascination as controversy. For some, the Akashic Records bring new hope, suggesting that it might be possible to reinterpret painful experiences and transcend limits imposed by ancestral traumas or social conditioning. For others, they represent a threat to the linear notion of time, as well as to the foundations of established religious traditions that regard the past as fixed under the absolute gaze of the divine. In both cases, the conversation calls on us to think deeply about the borders between faith, science, and power. Considering how such knowledge might transform society, the importance of inner awakening stands out. The realization that genuine salvation may not rely on rigid dogmas, religious institutions, or political ideologies, but rather on a profound connection to our own essence. The idea that each person holds within their consciousness the keys to understanding and even shaping their own story clashes with more orthodox doctrines, yet resonates with spiritual currents that stress the individual's autonomy. Thus, despite being cloaked in mystery, the Akashic Records serve as a provocation, prompting personal quests for meaning. Nonetheless, it is essential to weigh the responsibility that comes with delving into knowledge that, at least in theory, could change reality itself. If it really is possible to manipulate timelines or rewrite certain events, who should hold this power? And how can we ensure it will not be used for the benefit of only a few? Such inquiries multiply, becoming part of the process of self-discovery. In the end, everyone must decide inwardly whether to view the Akashic Records as just a metaphor or as a real possibility for accessing a greater field of information. If we choose the latter, then life on Earth is no longer rigidly defined, but rather a journey in co-creation. The key could lie in perceiving that what we call salvation is not found in dogmas or institutions, but in each awakening that expands our understanding of our interconnection with all beings. After all, from this perspective, the most important change happens not out there in the world, but inside each person. Meditation offers an essential path for those seeking to experience this expansion of consciousness more directly and connect more deeply with their role as co-creators. We have developed a set of audio tools to help you go inward and activate this expanded state of awareness. If you would like immediate access to those resources, just click the link on the screen or in the comments. If this video's content resonated with you, let us know in the comments by saying, "It made sense to me,"